This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Friday, March 16th, 2007, and this is episode 230 of Walt Disney World Today. I'm your host, Matt Hochberg of MGMstudios.org. On the show today, we have Mike Newell of Mouse World Radio. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Matt. How you doing tonight?
Outstanding. And myself, Len Testa, co-author, then official guide to Walt Disney World. Welcome, Len.
How's it going, Matt?
Outstanding. And we have Mike Scopa of MousePlanet.com. Welcome, Mike.
You know, it seems to me that we're the only nation in the country that waits until we get into war before we start getting ready for it.
The American Adventure.
Will Rogers, yeah.
And our special guest today is a legend of the Walt Disney Company, Charles Ridgway, whose new book, Spinning Disney's World, Memoirs of a Magic Kingdom Press Agent, is available at your local bookstore, and we'll have a link to buy it in this episode show notes. Welcome to the show, Charlie.
Thank you for having me.
And this is it's our honor to have you on tonight because this is a legit guest. No more of these, Mongellos or Goldhavers or real bona fide,
Disney
or Lou
legend.
again. Or Lou again.
Or Lou again.
Just kidding.
Yeah, we got nothing. We bring Lou on. So, Charlie, we brought you on tonight, and you wrote a book which is called Spinning Disney's World. And, of course, for our listeners who are not aware, you were a press agent for the Walt Disney Company. And this goes back to Disneyland. This is 1950.
Right, began in January of 1963, so it's well over whatever number of years that is now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just, it's certainly, we're gonna ask you the obligatory question, the one that everybody asks you, how was it to work with, Walt Disney?
I've been asked that before. It was a great inspiration, really. Walt was he didn't bowl you over exactly, but when you finish talking to him, you say, that was a heck of a guy. He was inspiring, he was dedicated, he was hardworking, he was not always an easy guy to work for because he wanted things done right and he expected to be done right. And at least for most people, he didn't really want to hear you say you couldn't do it. My favorite guy in the company, I think, was Admiral Joe Fowler, who was the can-do man. Whatever Walt asked him to build, the answer was can-do. And I think most of us were that way, not because we were forced to, but because we were so inspired by his example and his imagination. We loved doing it.
Now, let me ask you this, Charlie. I was wondering this as I was thinking today when you were about to come on. This is Walt's unfortunately passed for quite a while now. A lot of people today talk about, Walt would have liked this, or you know what? I think this attraction is really what Walt would have liked. Do you think that Walt's persona, his likes and dislikes have been? Do you think that they're still true? Do you think people still have a sense of what Walt really would like today?
It's not exactly what Walt would like as much as wanting to preserve the kind of spirit that Walt personified. And I think there are many people, many of whom didn't know Walt, in fact, weren't even alive when he was alive, who carry on that spirit of quality, of family interest, of good entertainment first, of being a place that is neat and clean and well done, a place that's a happy place to come to. And those kind of ideas are still very much present today. I don't know that there are a lot of people around that say, well, now, would Walt have done it that way? Because I'll tell you one thing, nobody could predict what Walt would want. He was very changeable, and many times, the Haunted Mansion is an outstanding example. I remember being up at Walt Disney, what's now Walt Disney Imagineering, one day when Walt came through, and they'd spent several years designing the Haunted Mansion. And he looked over the presentation that they were making to him of everything. He said, no, that's not right. Let's go back. Let's start all over again.
Wow,
and they did. Yeah, so they spent a year sort of going back and starting all over. And I think that was what produced the kinds of attractions that really gets people's attention and makes them live for a long, long time.
Wow, that's probably not the same sort of that's in place right now.
Well, Walt wanted to go the extra distance. He was a great one for small detail, and he understood and recognized every every bit of a project that was going on. And so little things on the way up on top of the building where some people would say, "Oh, no, I don't notice that." Well, I said, "Well, I will." You know, it was what appeared to be an iron grating up on top of the building 3 stories high, but if it weren't there, it would not be the same.
So good point, Charlie. Let me ask you this question: how much did money, like for construction costs, factor into Walt's decisions on how to make attractions? Was money the overriding concern?
Walt was a very good businessman, but he didn't much like pencil pushers. Roy Disney was the financial guy in the crowd, and it was kind of up to Roy to arrange enough money to pay for things. These very expensive ideas, but he did so because Walt had been proved so many times that investment was worth everything they put into it. I think there's a lot more analyzing that goes on these days, partly because I guess we have computers and stuff like that, and there's a lot more meetings and lengthy considerations of projects that didn't take place when Walt. In fact, it didn't take place very much when Michael Eisner and Frank Wells came aboard. They were ones that had a great imagination and dreams and were willing to take the risk and say, "Let's do it. It's the right thing to do." A lot of it was done on gut reaction, and whether that was the best thing or not, who knows? It was pretty successful.
Hey, Charlie, this is Mike Scopa. To follow up on that question, if you could, this is actually a 2-part question. Number one, if you could pinpoint a major difference between how attractions are evolved today as compared to how they evolved when Walt was alive, what would you say would be the biggest difference? And secondly, I'd love for you to tell our listeners the story about Michael Eisner when he was talking about the Disney decade and how he just loved the Tower of Terror and that little incident that occurred with the Orlando Sentinel and that Tower of Terror.
Okay. Well, that was an exciting time, as it was when Walt was around. I don't think there's I think the pattern that Walt laid down and how to plan attractions is still being followed today. They start with idea in somebody's head, and then they go to the drawing board and do sort of storybook sketches as they were used to in the movie business, and then they go to models, and then they go to full-scale mock-ups, and then the beginnings of portions of attractions that are built on sound stages or wherever they're being built, and then finally moved into place along with everything else. There's a lot of research that has always gone into it, so that they have the background, and the WDI library has always been very extensive in enabling the designers to go and look up the history of things or to look at things that might work into whatever attraction they're working on. So I don't know it's all that much difference. I think the main difference might be that there are times when after a long study, the finance department says, "No, that isn't going to pay for itself." I think there are times that they decide against doing things today, where in the earlier days when Walt was around, and even when the early days of Michael Eisner and Frank Wells, they would have said, "Let's go ahead and do it anyway." I'll give you an example of that. I think it's good. Don't let me forget about going back to your other question. But I think the outstanding because it's very unusual, probably the only instance of it, was Mickey's Birthday Land. I think it's now called Mickey's Toontown Fair.
Right.
It had several different names. But we were planning Mickey's 60th birthday. We were well over a year out from it, and we were trying to come up with ideas beyond just another parade. And parades were always very good for us, but we wanted more to it than that. And our guys began thinking about, well, maybe a tent where we could have a party and all the kids could come and share a cake with Mickey and so forth. We could have a character show. Now, it outgrew that. We started planning a whole land devoted to Mickey. And it was partly to meet a need for something for younger children. And so many of the attractions at the park were from maybe 8 or 9 years old up, primarily, but nothing for the 3 and 4-year-old, the toddlers. So this was kind of to meet that need. And we came up with some sketches that were made by the advertising art department. Some of the guys, Ducky Williams and others in that department who were used to drawing characters, came up with some schemes for Mickey's house and his old car sitting beside it, and a dressing room where people could actually meet Mickey, and a show in Kent and so forth. And they went to Michael with that idea, and he liked it, turned it over to WDI and said, let's see what you think of it, and they needed to make some plans on it. They were busy building the Disney MGM studio at the time, came back and said, we just don't have time to do it now, but we think it's a good idea, but maybe it belongs at the studio later on. So it was put aside, and we kept trying to figure out what we were going to do for the birthday. So months later, our guys started drawing some additional drawings and scheming up some ideas and a great big blow-up statue of Mickey Mouse and so forth, and went back to Michael. This was in February of the year that Mickey's 60th, and his 60th birthday was tomorrow in November. And they said, we'd still like to do this, and we think we can do it. We can get it done by the maintenance people rather than go out for outside contractors and so forth in the usual way of which things are planned. And he looked it all over and said, can you do it? And we said, we called and said, yes, we think if we can have it done by November when the birthday rolls around. Michael thought a minute and said, well, okay, let's do it, but you've got to have it done by May 15th so we can impact the summer attendance. Well, that knocked everybody over, and so we called down to the maintenance guys and said, do you think you can do it? And they hemmed and hawed, yeah, we think we can. So the next morning, they started work on it without any engineering drawings or anything else. It was just fly by the seat of your pants. One of my friends was kind of a liaison with the maintenance people, and they would call him in the middle of the night at home and say, are you sure that's where this picture goes on the wall at Mickey's house? And Tom would say yes, and he'd hear the guy start hammering the nail. So it was built that way, and it turned out to be a hugely successful attraction that wound up costing, I think it was around $12-13 million, which was not very much compared to a lot of other attractions. And it attracted, I think, 5% of the audience that summer that came to Disney World came to see that attraction. And it was never one that it did before or after like that. When WDI took it over and did a similar attraction at Disneyland, they spent several times that much money on it. It turned out to be a wonderful attraction, but it certainly wasn't done the way ours was. Back to your other question.
The Twilight Zone. Yep.
Oh, yeah. The incident of when we were in the process of announcing what was to be called the Disney Decade. It was 10 years of growth beginning in 1990, following the opening of the Disney MGM studios, and we were announcing various things that we were going to build in that decade. No, I take it back. It was the Disney MGM studios was part of that announcement, and we took some press people from the East Coast who flew about the West Coast then to announce all the things we were going to do at Disneyland. Then we brought the whole bunch down here to announce what we were going to do at Disney World. But in just a few days before those announcements were to take place, we went out to sit down with Michael and write the press releases that were to go into the press kit at that time. And we were sitting around the table for several hours, well into the night, with Michael. I would write some of it, and he would write some of it, and we'd compare notes and so forth. Every little while, Michael would say, yeah, WDI didn't know about this yet, but we're going to build it. So, in effect, we were planning by press release. The other incident that happened in connection with it, one of the things that they had some sketches and plans on was something called the Tower of Terror, or the Hollywood Hotel, which was subsequently built as a major new attraction at the studio. And we had some sketching drawings of it and a story about it. And the night before we were to have the press conference, Michael said, let's pull that back. I don't want to give away too many secrets to the opposition, so let's just not put that as a part of the release. So we rushed out and rewrote the releases and got all the pictures put away, except one. One picture was left out accidentally, and somebody, a reporter for the Orlando Sentinel, picked it up and read on the picture, and all it said was Hollywood Hotel. So the Sentinel carried a story to the effect that among the projects that we were planning was a Hollywood Hotel, not as an attraction, but as a hotel. I always thought it would have been a good idea if we'd have had a haunted mansion type hotel.
Yeah. That is a pretty funny story. You know, one of my speaking of, you know, a lot of the book that you got here, Charlie. It's a lot of stories, and it makes it for a very easy read. Mike Scope and I have both read the book, and you know, it's just, you know, we just found ourselves. I know personally, it's not that I didn't, you know, the only reason I ever put the book down is because I had to go do something else. It wasn't because, you know, I was getting tired or something like that. I mean, just, you know, story after story, and it's really very engaging. And one of the stories I really enjoyed, and I think Mike Scope enjoyed it also, is, and you can share with our listeners, is the story about Donald Duck's 50th birthday celebration. This is a great one, and this is one where Charlie, you kind of pat yourself on the back a little bit in the book, well, don't you?
Sometimes I've called that the high point of my career, as goofy as it was, well, or modeled as it was, perhaps. These stories pretty much are the kinds of tales that I told to my news media friends over the years, and we were sitting around dinner table or waiting for something to happen, and I've talked about the good old days with Walt and some of the earlier things and things that had happened that I thought were unusual and whatnot. And several of them said, well, you really ought to write a book. And I said, well, I've tried a couple of times, and it doesn't seem to come out very well. And finally, one of my writer friends just a couple of years ago gave me the clue. He said, instead of trying to write it, sit down with a tape recorder and talk it just like you've been told us. So that's how I got started in that voice. It was okay, but the Donald Duck incident was typical of some of the crazy ideas that we came up with that somehow worked. We were planning this Donald's 50th birthday. I think it was 1987, perhaps. A year or so out, and I said, gee, wouldn't it be fun if we could have 50 white ducks, those Peking ducks, follow Donald down the street for the parade? Everybody sort of laughed, and somebody said, well, can you do that? And we didn't know, so we called our bird expert, and he did some investigating, said, yes, you could do it, but you have to have the ducks bond with the character from the time they're born. So we sent Donald down to the hatchery in Miami so he could be there when they were hatching out of the eggs, and he got down on the floor with them and played with these little yellow fur balls, and it made some great pictures that got on television down there that night. And we brought them up, put them out at Fort Wilderness for several months, and till they were grown up. And each day, Donald would go out and throw out some lettuce and whatnot. They'd learn to follow him around, and eventually we moved to a pen behind my office in City Hall, right off of Main Street. And each morning, Donald would come and lead them out on the main street before the park opened, and put them back in their pen. And I said, gee, you know, if they're going to a party, they ought to have party hats on. So one of our costume guys came up with the idea for a little cone-shaped hat about 3 inches high. We decided to put red ribbons around their necks with a name tag like the employees wear, like the cast members, as we call them, wear in the park. And we called them Alice in Wonderland Duck and Goofy Duck and Grumpy Duck and all the rest of the Disney characters followed by the word duck, and put those on them. Well, we started putting the hats on the duck. The first hat we put on, all the other ducks immediately attacked the one that had the hat on. And we couldn't figure that out. Finally, we figured they might be jealous. So we put a guide in the pen, and we put the hat on one duck, put him over the other side, the hat on the second duck, and so forth. As long as the rest of them had the hats on, they were fine. But if only one of them had it, they really went after him in a big way. It turned out to be so successful that we decided, well, these ducks are not going to be able to walk that 3/4 mile route of the parade, so we built a float for them. So we had a little float built with a picket fence around it where the ducks could ride on top. I think Donald was split up higher than them. And there was a duck quack, 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 quack song that as they went down the street. And it turns out that ducks, when they get a little warm, and of course it does get warm down here in the summertime, can't. And their mouths open and close, so it looked like they were quacking in tune with the quacking song.
And you, of course, took all the credit for it, Charlie, right?
Absolutely. Now, there were lots of other people who contributed to it, including Gene Hawk, who was the costuming guy that came. Gene told me the other day that he had considered putting a Donald Mouse ear hat on the ducks, and actually had kept a model of that, but we decided that the party hats would be better.
There you go.
That's great.